Imagine this. It's the 1970s, and direct flights are buzzing with tourists and businessmen zipping from Tel Aviv to Tehran. Israeli farming experts are right there in Iran, rolling up their sleeves and helping to transform the countryside into something amazing. Get this, while all that's happening, Iranian oil is secretly flowing through a pipeline, lighting up the cities of Israel. Isn't that wild? This isn't some political fantasy. This was the reality. For decades, Iran and Israel were more than just friendly. They were like quiet, powerful allies. Their spy agencies teamed up, generals coordinated strategies, and their economies were surprisingly intertwined. So what the heck happened? How did these two nations, once so close, end up as bitter enemies? It's a struggle that could pull the entire Middle East into a massive conflict. Crazy, right? This is the story of a friendship that everyone forgot, and the revolution that turned it into pure hatred. Today's headlines are like a non-stop roller coaster of threats, proxy wars, and all those sneaky operations, right? It's super easy to just assume that Iran and Israel have always been at each other's throats, like sworn enemies forever. It feels like one of those basic facts we all just accept. But here's the kicker. History tells a totally different story. It's actually way more surprising than you might think. Before 1979, the alliances in the Middle East were totally different from what we see today. Israel, surrounded by unfriendly Arab nations, and Iran, a strong non-Arab player, actually found common ground. They viewed each other as partners in survival and success, and it wasn't just some casual relationship, it was a solid, strategic alliance that really shaped the whole region. But here's the kicker. This partnership was built on a shaky foundation that was about to crumble. To really get a grip on the conflict we see today, it's crucial to understand the piece they've somehow forgotten. Section 1. The Alliance of the Periphery back in the 1950s. Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, had this really smart idea for foreign policy called the Alliance of the Periphery. The concept was pretty straightforward. Since we're surrounded by enemies, why not make friends with the non-Arab countries on the outskirts of the region? The key player in this whole strategy was Iran, which was under the leadership of the pro-Western monarch, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. This alliance was super practical for both Iran and Israel. Can you believe that Iran, with all its oil wealth, became one of Israel's biggest energy suppliers? At one point, an incredible 60% of Israel's oil came straight from Iran. They had this secret, jointly owned pipeline that stretched from the Red Sea all the way to the Mediterranean. This arrangement was a total game changer, provided Israel with the energy it desperately needed, while giving Iran a reliable customer. Plus, it cleverly sidestepped all those Arab-controlled sea lanes. How wild is that? It wasn't just about oil, you know? El Al, Israel's national airline, actually had regular direct flights between Tel Aviv and Tehran. Can you believe that? Israeli engineers were everywhere in Iran, lending a hand with massive development projects. And in a cool twist, Iranian students were coming to Israeli universities. There was this vibrant cultural exchange happening, and it felt alive. For the 80,000 or so Jews living in Iran, it was truly a golden age of freedom and safety, something you just didn't see anywhere else in the region. The cooperation went even deeper, diving into the shadowy world of spies and secrets. Did you know that Israel's famous intelligence agency, Mossad, actually trained the Shah's notoriously brutal secret police, Savak? Pretty wild, right? Top Israeli officials, including future prime ministers like Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres, were flying to Tehran to coordinate military policy. They were both super concerned about the Soviet Union and the rising tide of Pan-Arab nationalism, led by figures like Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser. It seemed like a solid, profitable, and secure alliance. But here's the kicker. The whole thing hinged on one Githa Shah. And let me tell you, his grip on power was a lot weaker than anyone realized. Section 2. The coming storm. While the Shah was cozying up to the west in Israel, things were getting pretty intense back home. For a lot of Iranians, his regime felt like a corrupt, brutal dictatorship, just doing the dirty work for outsiders, especially the US, which they called the Great Satan. The Shah's extravagant lifestyle and secular policies really rubbed many people the wrong way. It didn't matter if you were a deeply religious conservative or a leftist student. There was plenty of frustration to go around. Fanning the flames from his exile in France was a charismatic and hardline cleric, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. His message: It was both powerful and straightforward. He called for the removal of the Shah and the establishment of a new Islamic republic, one that would push out Western influence and stand up for the oppressed. Khomeini's ideology was deeply influenced by his strong dislike for Israel. It wasn't just about the Shah's alliance. He saw Israel as an illegitimate colonial power, a little Satan right in the middle of the Muslim world. His passionate sermons, which were smuggled into Iran, ignited a fire in a whole generation of revolutionaries. They viewed the Shah, America, and Israel as a combined force of oppression, uniting them in their struggle for change. That so-called stable friendship was really just a facade, hiding a political volcano ready to erupt. The tension was palpable, and you could feel the energy building beneath the surface. Section 3. The earthquake of 1979 and 1979. That volcano finally blew its top, and boy, did it shake things up. The Iranian Revolution swept through the country like a wildfire, forcing the Shah to flee and bringing an end to a monarchy that had lasted for 2,500 years. When Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile, millions of people flooded the streets to welcome him back. This wasn't just a pivotal moment for Iran, it completely rewired the politics of the entire Middle East. The change was instant and total, leaving a lasting impact that we still feel today. The brand new Islamic Republic didn't waste a second. It cut all ties with Israel, and this wasn't some quiet, polite diplomatic break. It was a loud, public declaration of war. One of the first things the new regime did was kick out all Israeli diplomats. The moment was electric, the knockout punch everyone had been waiting for. Picture this. The keys to the former Israeli embassy in Tehran were handed over, face-to-face to Yasser Arafat, the leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization. Can you even imagine the atmosphere? The Star of David came down, and up went the Palestinian flag. Arafat was celebrated like a revolutionary hero, and you could just feel the shift in the air. It was a moment that really marked a turning point, right? The message was crystal clear. Iran's friendship with Israel was officially over. Their new mission, the liberation of Palestine and the complete dismantling of the Zionist state. What a powerful statement that was. Khomeini's fiery words transformed into official state policy, which is pretty intense, right? The regime even launched Quds Day, or Jerusalem Day, a state-sponsored event, where huge crowds gathered to chant death to Israel. Just like that, years of cooperation vanished, replaced by this deep-seated ideological hatred. It felt like the end of their alliance. But wait, it wasn't over just yet. It's pretty wild how fast the world can change, right? If you're finding this hidden history as fascinating as I do, take a second to subscribe and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss the other stories we're digging into that explain how our world got to be the way it is. Section 4. Enemies with benefits. Just a year after the revolution, Iran faced a shocking twist. It was invaded by its neighbor, Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The Iran-Iraq War spiraled into a horrifying 8-year-long bloodbath that claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands. With Iran now seen as a global outcast and hit hard by sanctions, the country was in dire need of weapons and spare parts for its military. Most of their gear was American-made, left over from the Shah's era, making the situation even more complicated. And in one of the biggest ironies in modern history, who did they turn to for help? Israel's leaders faced a really tough decision. They were definitely not fans of the new regime in Tehran. But then there was Saddam Hussein's Iraq, looming large with its massive army and big regional ambitions. It felt like a much bigger, more immediate threat to their survival, right? Their reasoning was pretty straightforward. If Iran loses, Iraq could become way too powerful. So in a way, it was actually in Israel's best interest to keep Iran in the fight. It's wild how complex these geopolitical situations can get. What happened next was one of the wildest, most secretive deals of the Cold War. Picture this. Iran, while publicly shouting death to Israel, was secretly dropping hundreds of millions of dollars to buy weapons from none other than Israel. Crazy, right? Through a sneaky network of arms dealers and hush-hush flights. Israel was sending artillery, spare parts, and ammunition straight to the Islamic Republic. They even went as far as sending Israeli instructors to quietly train Iranian commanders on how to handle all that new gear. Can you believe it? This whole bizarre setup eventually exploded into the infamous Iran-Contra affair in the mid-80s. It was a huge scandal where the US, with a little help from Israel, decided to sell arms to Iran. Why? Well, it was all in exchange for assistance in freeing American hostages in Lebanon. The whole thing was like a masterclass in realpolitik, showing us that even when ideologies clash, the basic instinct for survival can push the worst of enemies into a secret, unholy alliance. Pretty wild, right? Section 5. The Shadow War and Open Fire. Once the Iran-Iraq War was over, that secret cooperation completely dried up. The ideological hatred, which had been put on the back burner out of pure necessity, came roaring back. By the 1990s, the relationship had morphed into something new and dangerous: a shadow war. Iran, fully embracing its revolutionary identity, really dove into exporting its ideology. It became the go-to sponsor for militant groups whose main goal was to take on Israel. You've probably heard of Hezbollah in Lebanon and later on Hamas in Gaza, right? Iran supported them with cash, training, and some seriously powerful weapons. They used these groups as proxies to strike at Israel while keeping their own hands clean. Pretty wild, huh? Israel fought back in a pretty stealthy way, right? Assad has been tied to a bunch of daring covert operations that are just mind-blowing. Think about its sophisticated cyber attacks like the infamous Stuxnet virus, which literally took out thousands of Iranian nuclear centrifuges. And then there are those targeted assassinations of some of Iran's top nuclear scientists. For years, this was the game. A dangerous, deniable war waged with spies and proxies, all under the radar. It's wild how much goes on behind the scenes, isn't it? The fight has recently burst into the open, shaking things up in a way we haven't seen before. Back in 2024, things took a wild turn when an Israeli strike hit an Iranian consulate in Syria, breaking all the unwritten rules of engagement. Iran didn't just sit back. They responded with a missile and drone barrage aimed directly at Israel, marking a historic first. This back and forth really shattered the old way of doing things, right? Then, just when you thought it couldn't get crazier, 2025 rolled around, and the situation escalated even further. Israel launched direct strikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites, and of course, Iran retaliated. This kicked off a terrifying new phase of open warfare that has everyone on edge. It's wild to think about how quickly everything has changed. The story of Iran and Israel is pretty wild, like a pendulum swinging between cold, hard pragmatism and intense ideology. For around 30 years, they found some common ground that led to one of the most stable and honestly surprising alliances in the Middle East. They were partners, no doubt about it, just trying to survive in a really tough neighborhood. The 1979 revolution swung that pendulum hard in the other direction, placing that partnership with a hatred so deep it became a core part of Iran's identity. But even then, the ghost of pragmatism showed up during the Iran-Iraq War, pushing the two enemies back into a secret partnership of convenience. Today, we're witnessing a pretty wild shift. Open, direct conflict. Can you believe it? Just think back to the days of secret pipelines and discreet flights. What a different world that was. This journey from allies to adversaries and now to outright combatants isn't just some forgotten chapter in history. It's actually the main fault line running through the modern Middle East. Understanding its past is absolutely crucial if we want to make sense of the dangerous present we're living in. What part of this hidden history shocked you the most? Let me know down in the comments. And for more deep dives that explain how we got to where we are today, check out the video on your screen right now. Thanks for watching.